In this worksheet called vlookupApprox, we need to look up information to put in column E. It'll be a reduction rate based on the tables in columns H and R. Excel has multiple lookup functions. The two most common ones are vlookup and hlookup. The vlookup is most common and the V means vertical. We want to look up information vertically in the table. The table on the right has information in its leftmost column. It indicates breakpoints for a reduction in the cost of an item. In cell E3, we want to calculate the reduction rate for the amount in D3. In the table on the right, we want to get 3% because that value hasn't reached 1500. When you're using a VLOOKUP table, ideally you should have a table nearby, which you can use the VLOOKUP table where the table is located on a different worksheet or a different workbook. If you want to test the answers immediately or view what you've done, it's best to have a table nearby. The VLOOKUP function will always compare information with the left column of the table and then give answers out of other columns. Sometimes a VLOOKUP table has just 2 columns and sometimes more. Having not seen a lookup function, you may feel you could use an if function here. It's possible in theory, but would be very lengthy and very difficult to debug and correct. The VLOOKUP function will allow us to take the value that we see in D3 and compare with the entries on the left-hand side. If we come to a value which is too large, like 1500, we'd revert to the previous entry and then go to the column on the right to get the answers. We don't have to say much with the VLOOKUP function, though it provides us with all we need. So we'll zoom in and make the column wider so we can see this more clearly. This example shows how we use the VLOOKUP function to come up with an approximate answer. None of these entries in column D probably match up to these. So we're trying to match these up with the breakpoints. We'll begin with equal vlookup. The vlookup function has 3 or 4 arguments. The first one is where is the value that we're looking up. Here it's D3. We can type or click it, comma. Now we refer to where the table is located. We select these cells. That's the location of the table, comma. Column index number we see displayed below this. So column 2 of the table has the answers. It's actually column I, but the second column of the table. We'll have the answer when we press enter. If you have only a single sub, Excel will put in the parentheses for you. So this value has not reached 1500, but has passed 1000, so it's 3%. If we want to copy this formula downwards, I'll double click to edit this. If we don't make a change to this table reference, it'll become H4 to I9, and then later H5 to I10. We want to make this reference absolute. This can be done by manually typing $signs or just press the function key F4 to make the address absolute. We don't want it to change as we copy it down the column. By pressing enter here doesn't change the first entry, but now as we copied this downward for just a few cells, there's more answers here. The 337 didn't reach the 500 level, so there's no reduction at all. 2399 hasn't reached 2500 but has reached 2000, therefore it's 6%. So these situations need the date in the left column to be in ascending order. If the data isn't, you may get believable answers and some may be correct, but you need to make sure that these are in ascending order if you expect to get correct answers. These examples shows how using the vlookup function comes up with what's called an approximate match, and sometimes these tables are quite large and many times they contain more than 2 columns. Another way to do this, which may make it simpler, is if you know there's nothing else in column H and R, we can make our original variation here of the table reference be a lot simpler. Instead of this entry here, we can simply drag across these 2 columns, and the entry H column I means H and R. We can complete the entry and then drag down a few cells to see if it's still working. Then completely drag it down the column by double clicking in the lower right hand corner. That was the vlookup function for what's called an approximate match. After completing this, we would readjust the column to display the information in that way.